We'll see that as a JD.
Zach has joined us.
Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to our Easter edition. I'm running through the agenda. So I'd like to open the meeting and acknowledge the traditions of the Ngarluma people on whose land we are gathered today. So item 2 is just discussing about this meeting. So the purpose of the public briefing session is for councillors to ask questions, obtain additional information related to items for consideration at the next OCM. No decisions are made at the public agenda briefing sessions. The meeting is conducted as a public meeting of the council, and so the standard orders that normally apply will still apply. And councillors can ask questions and they can be answered by the CEO or a person nominated by the CEO. This meeting is also live streamed. And just to make everyone aware, if you are online watching, the recordings are copyright material and can't be used without the written permission of the CEO. So 3 is the record of attendance or apologies. So we have Jodie Swaffer, who is sick. She's going to dial online. She'll be with us, but she's not going to contribute because she's not feeling well. Kelly is away during having a holiday, and Councillor Roots has been held up. She's going to dial in when she can. And Councillor Simpson is also away camping. So yeah. But why are we here?
Someone's got to keep the business running, I think.
Right. Okay, so item 4 is public question time. Do we have any public questions? I don't want to ask anything, but how's it?
Oh, not just yet.
Okay, 5 is petitions, deputations from presentations, of which we have a couple. And first on our list is, well, I can choose, can I? And considering Zach and Nikki have dialed in, we'll get Zach and Nikki, who will be doing a deputation on item 11.1. All right, Zach, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, Mayor, and hello, councillors, and waiver to everyone that is listening from traditional country. Councillors, if you don't know me, I'm Zach, Gundjamara man from Southwest Victoria and also a Palawa man from Tasmania. I've been living in Port Hedland and the Pilbara for the last 3 or 4 years, and I've had a bit of success in doing pop-up dinners across the Pilbara celebrating Indigenous culture through food. I go as the storyteller chef, as a lot of people would know. I'm married to Bobby Lockyer, a Ngarluma woman, and also Karratha woman as well. So thank you for allowing me to have a bit of an opportunity to speak on tonight. So a bit of a backstory. Last year, I teamed up with Northwest Brewery to do Staircase to the Moon, which is obviously a massive thing in the Pilbara and also the Northwest in Broome. And we did a dinner at Hearson's Cove, obviously, which is part of Murajuga National Park. And we did canapes there, and then we brought it back to Northwest Brewery. But this year we're wanting to go one step further and have the whole dinner and the whole event at Hearson's Cove to celebrate Murajuga National Park, but more importantly to give the people of Karratha an opportunity to eat dinner done by 2 local businesses, myself as storyteller chef and Northwest Brewery as well. It's really important to understand that, especially in the Pilbara, just down in Karratha, experience just over last week, and it was great to see everyone out there. But I think this is what Karratha needs. Obviously, we're talking about this year's event, Dinner Under the Moon. They've got Kimberley Moon up in Broome, but I'm wanting to do it at Hearson's Cove to bring more and more people to the area. Obviously, this is just the 1 year step, but I'm wanting to do it over 3 years. If the event is successful this year, which I know it will be, we've already sold 40 tickets and we haven't done any promotion around it. But next year we're wanting to obviously, do a dinner and then do a concert. And then the third year, I'm wanting to put on a fashion show, a dinner, a concert, and market stalls as well. And after the third year, I'm very, very happy and also wanting to announce as well that I'll be handing this over to an Aboriginal corporation so they can traditionally own it, they can own it, and they can do what they want to do with it. It's just about building something up and giving an opportunity for City of Karratha to get behind this. We've had festivals in City Karratha, but I think there's something unique where I think it'll bring tourists in from Perth to overseas wanting to see the rock art as well, but then also enjoying dinner. Next year will be a dinner and a concert. I've already spoken to Thelma Plum down at Karratha, and she's wanting to come up and play. But yeah, this year's all about the dinner. And I think for me as an Aboriginal man, working with local businesses like Rap Creations, Northwest, Brewery, Go West bus rentals have already come on, and also on-site rentals as well. And then next year, Nexus are wanting to come on as well to do flight packages. But yeah, as I said, this is all about the dinner. And I think if City Karratha get behind it, you guys are going to be the pearl and the pilbara. Pardon my pun, obviously you find pearls in Broome. But that's my goal. And I think if anyone knows me, I'm a go-getter. I'm a chef on a mission to celebrate culture through food, and what better way to do it with the City of Karratha, but more importantly at Hearson's Cove. I think everyone talks about Hearson's Cove, and we do see some events down there, but let's talk about City of Karratha having its own event for the next 3 years. But let's concentrate on the dinner this year and get it right, because I truly feel this will be something that people will come from Perth from Broome. And you can only look at the past experience of Karratha experience, pardon the pun. They built that up from a dinner, and now, when I was there's about 1,500 people coming into that national park. So that means, hopefully there'll be 1,500 people coming into the City of Karratha, spending on local businesses, but more importantly, seeing the rock art that is one of the oldest rock arts in the world, but hopefully it'll get heritage listed very soon. So I'm not here to make profit. I'm not here to make a name for myself. All I want is to see the Pilbara for what it really is, which is a beautiful landscape rather than just seeing the Pilbara as a mining industry. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Zach, for that. And it's on the agenda tonight. We'll run through it. And does anyone have any questions of Zach Bell or got him online? No, but we've got the item on the agenda, mate. And it sounds like an exciting project. And obviously the next item is declarations of interest, as you just heard Zach announce my business. I've got a declaration of interest in this, and the brewery's really excited to be part of this and see how it goes. But all right, mate. Well, listen, we'll leave it there. So thanks very much for your deputation, and we'll run through the agenda. And next week it'll be on for the councillors to vote on.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
sure.
Much appreciated.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Vicky.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, and the next deputation is from Councillor Furlong.
Well, I got the podium.
Why not?
Good evening, everybody. Most of you know me as Jill Furlong, councillor for the City of Karratha. But like most of us here, I wear many hats, and tonight the hat I'm wearing is my position for the Denver Community Association, or DCA. I am the current acting operations manager for DCA, and I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to present on the importance to us of the partnership proposal for annual events between DCA and the City of Karratha, item 10.5 on tonight's briefing agenda. I'm not going to talk to you tonight about who the DCA is and how our many and varied achievements have been over the last 50 plus years. I know that you have all read the 19-page proposal document with details of the reasoning and breakdown of the funding requests. I want to take this proposal back to grassroots to break down the figures and what this funding equates to the mums and dads, to the small business owners, and for the community at large, from Point Sampson through to Dampier and everywhere in between. I'll start with the annual Dampier Art Awards and the Dampier Junior Art Awards. This was established in 2010, and the city have been our major sponsors since 2013. We also have 7 category sponsors and 1 other event sponsor. In our most recent award, we had 101 pieces of art exhibited. All of our artists need to reside within the city of Karratha. Only 33% of these artists reside in Dampier itself. We employ 3 local businesses to support us on our opening event. One of those businesses from Wickham, 1 from Karratha, and 1 from Dampier. To date, and it is still open, we have had 220 visitors so far to the exhibition and numerous artworks sold to support the artists. The Dampier Junior Art Award has 36 pieces entered from children right across the city of Karratha. Dampier Beachside Markets have been sponsored by the city of Karratha since inception in 2013. We host 3 markets, or 6 markets, 3 twilight, 3 morning markets a year. In 2025, our first market was held in April. We had 41 stall holders, including 10 tiny traders. 93% of all of these stall holders reside outside of Dampier, including small businesses from Wickham, Karratha, Roburn. We employ 5 local businesses to support us to host each market, 2 from the LIA, 2 from Karratha, and 1 from Dampier. Annually, we estimate a conservative 9,000 visitors to our markets, with an average of 25 stall holders. So that equates to 150 opportunities to support these small businesses annually. Each market we support a worthy non-for-profit. All non-for-profits are worthy in my mind, but we have to choose one. An organization that becomes our focus group. In April, we had the Pilbara Disability Network as our focus group. They raised over nearly $500 in donation. And most importantly, they had over 500 people come visit them at their stall, raising awareness of who they are and what they do in our community. The Dampier Photographic Awards and the Dampier Junior Photographic Awards started in 2022, and that's been sponsored by the City of Karratha since 2024. We also have 4 category sponsors for that award. In 2024, it's 72 pieces exhibited, while again, all of our artists need to be within the City of Karratha residents. 22% of the photographers live in Dampier. We have 2 small businesses who support these awards. Both of those businesses are Karratha-based businesses. Our 2025 awards are scheduled for September. Dampier Sunset Movies also been sponsored by City of Karratha since inception in 2013. We offer 6 free family-friendly movies annually. We employ a local AV business to help us host these movies. We support local sporting clubs with kiosk hire and beanbag hire. We host a VIP picnic area and acknowledge a community doer who gets nominated by other community members for their work within their volunteer area. We estimate about 150 plus patrons for each movie. We always have a DCA volunteer attend. So annually, that's 900 individuals, a great budget-friendly option for families who are doing it tough. Our Dampier Quilt Quest was a new event we introduced in 2024 after years of requests from community members. We had 20 entries in poetry and short stories, with 15% of those being from Dampier residents. This year, we will host the next Quilt Quest Awards in August, and we feel confident to do at least double the entries in 2025 as we have done with other awards. So the DCAA is a true supporter of our city's people, our families, our seniors, our creatives, our small business owners, and our recreation groups from Point Sampson to Dampier and everywhere in between. We would like to acknowledge the ongoing support of the City of Karratha to date and recognise that most of these events would not be possible without City and Council support. We would like to thank you for that. Now, of this proposal of this $101,000 ensures the future of our much loved community events. It allows our 2.8 full-time staff, along with our volunteer committee, to not only plan with confidence our current events, but also to collectively put on our thinking hats and think more of exciting ways that our city will become better than it is. The funding divided equally amongst these events is $6,343 per event, which I think, and I think you should all agree, is pretty good bang for your buck. It's time to embrace this partnership so the DCA can continue to be what we are: dedicated, committed, active.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jill, for that deputation. And it's just a great reminder of the DCA does a hell of a lot for the community and Dandy, but the community wider as well. So thanks for that. And then it's obviously on the agenda for tonight as well. Okay, so we're moving on to 6, which brings us to our declarations of interest, of which we have a couple. I have one, obviously. I have a direct financial interest in 11.1 for the major events and sponsorship and attraction program. As you heard from Zach, the storyteller chef, our chefs and our team will be a part of that event, trying to make it successful. Then we have Councillor Furlong has a financial interest on item 10.5 that she's did a deputation on, as she's employed by the DCA. And then Councillor Furlong also has a direct interest on 17.1, which is a confidential item. And she's, your husband is an employee of Rio Tinto. And then Councillor Gillan also has a direct financial interest on 17.1, as her partner is also employed by Rio Tinto. And she has a yes.
Yeah, that sums it up, yes.
Okay. Is any councillor any more at all? And I guess for those that aren't here and will be watching this online later, you do have a declaration of interest. Make sure you get it into us for next week's meeting.
Through the chair, I've just asked the team, not in this meeting round, but in the May meeting round, to move the declaration of interest forward so that it is before public question time and deputations. Then councillors can say, I've got a conflict, and then we know that when we're listening to a public question, or we know that if we're listening to a deputation. So if anyone's got any concerns with that, let me know, but otherwise we'll put that in place in May.
It's probably a good idea, because I had to declare my interest before I had to declare my interest.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it flows before we get into the meeting, you declare it, and then we can get on to the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Item 7 is the confirmation of minutes and business arising from minutes of the previous meeting. The officer's recommendation on page 6. And then 8 is the announcements by person presiding without discussion. All of my meetings that I had through the month of March. Neil, any questions on it? 9 is corporate commercial reports, being 9.1 being the statements for the period ended the 20th of February 2025, with the officer's recommendation on page 8. And that is that we received the financial statements. Does anyone have any questions in regards to our financial statements? No? Okay. Here. Okay, 9.2 is the list of accounts for the 1st of Feb 2025 to the end of February, with the officer's recommendation on page 17. There's that we received a list of payments totaling just over $10 million, as detailed in attachments 1, 2, and 3, being made up of those lists of payments 1 to 7. Does anyone have any questions on our list of accounts?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Yes, Royce Mallow.
Page 15 of 40. We had a DJ we paid $8,000 for Australia Day. Was that for multiple events, or was that just for the Australia Day Awards? Or was he there all day for $8,000? I thought it was a pretty large amount. Well, I know our accounts don't always list all the information, so large amount for a
Well, I'll take that one on notice.
DJ, $8,000 Australian.
Australian.
Yeah, just a large amount. And there was another one for, sorry, bear with me till I find it. It's for fairy lights for Torrens Australia. So page 35 and 40 for Torrens Australia. Community events, fairy light install. Is Torrens Australia, are they a local supplier? And was the fairy light installed for multiple events? Because it was $12,000. So I presume it's for labour.
I'll take that one on notice as well. Thanks, Nick.
And then just one on the CEO's credit card for Uber.
I'll like it up to
I just thought it was a large amount as well. Page 3 of the on the CEO, the credit card for $670 for an Uber. That was a large trip, so it must have been somewhere to somewhere.
I didn't have Uber for $600. Let me just have a look. I agree, that would be a lot.
Yeah, so it's just my queries. Thanks.
I think the 600 should be, I think there's been a typo. Let me confirm that, but definitely wasn't an Uber trip for 600. I think it should be the next one down, which is the A by Adina. So that was the accommodation, and it was
okay. Yeah,
it's actually
I thought it was a large amount. I thought that was weird. You must have gone.
Yeah.
Or something.
And I think what's happened, it looks like they've cut and pasted it across. So I will actually just confirm those figures for you and make sure that they're correct and that they line up. But that would have been the A by Adina, which was the accommodation in Canberra. Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions?
Well, I had a similar flag about the DJ,
Yes.
but I compared it to on page 713.633. We also had a DJ. We'll do the Christmas event, and it was 1,000 as opposed to 8,000.
So let me take that on notice, and I'll
Yes.
do a compare and contrast as well as finding out what happened. So thank you for that.
The DJs have differing rates on their quality then.
Normally, yeah, it's like $500 for a DJ, not 8,000.
Okay, any other questions on the list of accounts or purchases made? Okay. 9.3 is the investments for the period ended 20th of Feb 2025. And that this is just we're going to receive the investment report. So does anyone have any questions about our investments, term deposits, municipal funds, cash on hand? No?
I have one question on page
Councillor Gillum?
25 regarding the outstanding lessee balances
Yes.
for Suite ID 1 and 2, which is Fiorita. Is that end of the week? Is that now passed? Is that cleared?
So yeah, through the chair, I'll ask the director to answer that.
I'll take the notice and come back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there was an outstanding amount of $8,554.90, and I was just wondering whether that's Fiorita isn't often seen on this list. I was wondering if it had been cleared.
The corporate will take it on notice and we'll get that answered by next week or before the OCM. Any other questions on investments for the period of February? No. All right, 9.4 is the local government ordinary election with the officer's recommendation on page 28.
I think so. We've got a very quick presentation. So just so through the chair, what we have done in the past is we've done these presentations as a briefing to councillors, but behind closed doors. And so what we are doing is selectively we'll do presentation in the public domain so councillors can actually see the presentation at the same time as the community, and then the questions are sort of a little bit more natural in that you're not having to ask the question twice because you've heard the presentation before. So we'll keep it very short, and it's a new I suppose, a new format. So if it's a bit clunky or if it's not working, then let me know and we can try something different. But we thought we would give this a go. And Henry, you get to be the first cab off the rank. So well done.
Wonderful. All right. It's one way to find out whether the system works or not.
Yeah, that's right.
I have been told 3 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep it really quick.
I did ask for it to be short and sharp. Yeah. And you should be able to. Is your clicker not working? It's our first technical.
So
glitch,
far, so
isn't it?
good.
2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Working. Doesn't want to work.
Do you know any karaoke numbers?
Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
Exactly that.
That looks good. All right, try that.
Anyway, it's not working in the other slide, but anyway, so these are just some key election dates that are coming up in terms of the election. We need today's or next week's agenda is actually dealing with the appointment of, the process in terms of how we go about conducting our elections, whether it's going to be undertaken by a postal vote or by in person. We have to make this decision before. We have to make this decision before the 30th of July. So for this election, we have 5 seats that are coming up for to be filled. So there's currently 5 vacancies that will be coming up in the, there's 5 seats that are going to be coming up for change in this year. We're only electing 4 persons for those 5 vacancies. And then there's also going to be another seat that Councillor McNaught vacated, which has still got a 2-year term. So there will be 5 positions sought after, 4 seats for a 4-year term and 1 seat for a 2-year term. So to try and make that confusing, but this is that last year that we have where we're going through that transition from the 11 councillors down to the 9 councillors. Next page. Maybe that's the best way of dealing with it. I'll let flick. Yep. So we've got 2 issues to consider in terms of the council report that's coming up. The method of election, are we going to go down the pathway of a postal vote or are we going to go down the pathway of an in-person vote? There are certain conditions that apply to each of those things in terms of how those elections are going to be conducted and who's going to be conducting those elections. So if it is going to be a postal vote, under the current legislation, only the WA Electoral Commission can run the postal voting, whereas if we go down the pathway of in-person voting, you have either the option of the CEO being the returning officer, who is the default position. You can otherwise elect for the Electoral Commission or another person approved by the Electoral Commission. Next slide. We have, in terms of the method, yep.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That probably does help.
Yeah.
In terms of the method of the pros and cons for each of the methods, we have postal voting. As I said before, the Electoral Commission conducts the elections. Electors are currently familiar with the postal process that we've been running since 2007. Postal packs get distributed by the Electoral Commissioner to all the electors, and generally speaking, there's a higher voter participation rate with postal voting. Not, to be honest, nowadays it's probably not a lot of difference. It is probably a more expensive option, and in terms of the canvassing that you would have experienced, it's a very small window, usually a couple of weeks or so to do whatever canvassing once you've nominated before the packs go out. In terms of, sorry, gone on too many. In terms of the in-person voting, CEO, as I mentioned before, is usually the returning officer. It's a cheaper option to postal voting. It does have its issues though. Votes can be cast on, votes will generally be cast on election day. People can actually apply for postal packs, absentee packs and early voting packs. That's a whole heap of stationery that we need to organise beforehand if that's the pathway we go down. And obviously one of the other pros you have with in-person voting is you've got little bit more lead time in terms of your canvassing. So from the time you get nominated to pretty much the election day, that's when you can do your canvassing. Wrapping up the election, so in terms of who does the election, which pathway you go down, Electoral Commission, very well experienced in this area. They've been doing it for quite some time. They've got some pretty detailed software that can manage the elections on the count. It is, as I said before, a more expensive option, and they have some capability, although I suppose that's come under a little bit of scrutiny in more recent times with the state election, with some of the issues that they've encountered with running out of ballot papers and other management issues. In terms of the City of Karratha running it, it'll be something that will be run internally. It's generally a cheaper option. However, a lot of our costs can be absorbed into other business as usual activities. We do or will probably need the support of the department and Wagga, who are actually operating on the day as well, to provide any support if we do have any issues. But as I said, one of the cons to the city doing it is obviously we don't have the count software, so we'll need to source that. And staff will need some training. I think that's pretty much it. So that's just a quick wrap up of the elections coming up. There obviously is more information provided as we get closer to the election process and as we get involved in it. That's it. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Henry. Yes, councillors, any questions on the two voting methods?
So, Councillor McNaught, is his 4-year term is up this October?
No, I did have somebody who's coming up for 2 years.
Because he joined with us same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Or maybe it's Councillor
It was Councillor Swaffer.
Swaffer.
Yes.
Term's coming up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So she replaced.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a question from me, given that one of the options, the in-person election, requires significant input from the city, how does the executive and administration feel about that option? Is that a preferred option from your perspective, or would you rather post it?
Look, there's pros and cons with it all. I suppose the issue I have is that if we'll need to source some software to do it. Some of the businesses that I've CEO sort of indicated to me previously that there's a number of businesses that do have external elections. Some of the people that I've spoken to, they actually provide whole in-house, they provide the entire service. So that's going to be a problem in the sense that the postal elections, in terms of one of the companies that I spoke to, they actually deal with postal elections. So they send all the paperwork out to the relevant electors, and people respond electronically through that process. Now, the electoral committee, the legislation like that doesn't allow you to do that. In terms of post-election, can only be run by the Electoral Commission. So we do have Synergy Soft. I think there's an electoral component within the software that we currently got. I need to explore that, given that we haven't looked at a product since 2005. So that's just a bit of concern, but sorry, not a concern, but a bit of
Consideration, okay.
Check into.
And so through the chair, just in response to doing it internally, probably the only thing that I would say is that it tends to be better to have an arm's distance from administration. People like to have a degree of objectivity and regardless of how things go, if there's a problem and the CEO has to step in as returning officer and make any difficult calls, I think when it's the CEO who's also running a business, people just perceive that in whatever flavour they perceive that, if that makes sense. So I think for that reason alone, if there's a dispute, it's a lot easier to hand it over to an external party.
Have we got any figures, or if not, can we get them? When we last used it, 2005, what was the turnout for the in-person voting? I'm interested to see how well it was taken. I know it was a long time ago.
I think it might be in the report. If it's not, I'll
yeah, I just had a quick flick through again, but would have missed it. And then I suppose with nominations, obviously you've got the 4 for the 4 years and the 1 for the 2-year term. Can the nominees put down what term they want?
No.
How does that work?
So basically, it'll be an election for 5 positions. So the first 4 people who come up
Awesome.
will get the 4-year terms, and then whoever gets the 5th. Looks
Popular.
rocket, yeah, gets a 2-year term.
Yeah.
Which is no different to what we've been doing in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
Through the chair, the last person voting in person election was in 2005. There were, and it was a 12.78% voter turnout.
That's less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say one of the cons as well to in person is that it's the lower voter turnout? Because in the city of Karratha, we have a lower percentage of postal and in person compared to the state average. So that would be another con as well. Would you say that?
Yes, it would be. I think I'm not sure what the disparity is nowadays between in person and postal. I think that gap has reduced quite a lot, and there's a lot more councils that tend to be using postal voting or going down that path. Again, I think that stat was in the report. But yeah, we do have a high number of people who actually live outside of Karratha as well. So it's trying to get to those people. They would need to apply for a postal vote or some sort of absentee vote or something like that to be able to register. So they're going to have to register beforehand. So yeah, people have got to go through all that work of just trying to be able to vote, make it a low turnout simply because of apathy. People go through that exercise.
So yeah, that's what I was going to
Maybe,
ask.
maybe.
Because we have 5 different centres, are we going to, if we do in person, are we going to have?
Potentially, that's something we can consider. Yeah.
So through the chair, I mean, we've on the day people can vote in person, as you know, if they've forgotten or they've lost their ballot paper. We've got a process, so we do tend to have a few ballot booths open on the day. If it was going to be in person entirely, then we would have a broader distribution and make sure that there's at least something in each town centre, I think, at a minimum. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Henry. Any more questions? Okay. 9.5 is the reserve review. Thanks for that, Henry. 3536, which we also have a presentation on. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Over to you, Alison.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. So this is the reserves review. So as part of the agenda paper this month, we are asking Council we're working Council to rather our current reserves as they are and some of the changes that we have made. So starting off, just a description of the current reserves that we have and what they're called and the names of each of them, but also the purpose of each of them. As you'd be aware, with the reserves, as per the reserve policy, we have to come to council. When we start a new reserve, we allocate a purpose and the money is held for that purpose and can only be used for that purpose. And if we want to change anything, we come back through this process. The employee entitlement reserve there is for leave entitlements and packaging of the money that needs to be held aside for the covering of those expenses. The public open space reserve, once again, this, as the name suggested, is for monies for various activities in the public open spaces. There's an aerodrome reserve, that's for the airport and all the costs around associated with that. There's a carry forward budget reserve. And as the name suggests, again, it's for putting money aside for projects that go over multiple financial years, so carry forwards. There's community development reserve, once again, self-explanatory. There's a Dampier drainage reserve for drainage funds in Dampier. There's an economic development reserve for the said purpose as well. An infrastructure reserve for our infrastructure projects. A medical services assistance reserve for that project and program that we fund. A mosquito control reserves for getting rid of pesky mosquitoes. A partnership reserve, and that's for our partnership with Rio Tinto. a restricted funds reserve, and that's for holding restricted funds from grants in other areas. A waste management reserve for all the expenses and operation of the waste services. A workers' comp reserve for workers' comp. That takes us to a total of 14 reserves. So you might have been asking during that time why some of these reserves exist, and so that's a good point. So that comes to the next part of closing of some of the reserves that we don't need anymore. So carry forward budget reserves. So that used to be a way of allocating funds between financial years. We don't have to do that anymore. We haven't actually used that in the last couple of years, and there's other ways to carry budgets forward. The recommendation from the officer is to close that reserve. The community development reserve as well. It was there for a purpose, as I mentioned earlier, for some community development funds around policy CS19. This policy is being replaced with a different policy, and that policy will come to you in May's meeting. So the officer's recommendation is to close that reserve as well. The mosquito control reserve, again, was a very specific reserve, an old reserve that was for administration of CLAG funding. And so the money was kept aside for that purpose. The monies in that reserve is a very small amount, and you'll see that in the last slide. And we don't need to have that reserve anymore because we can just fund mosquito control programs from the municipal budget. So hence the recommendation is to close that reserve. The restricted funds reserve, once again, we haven't used this reserve in a while. And as per the new accounting standards, we don't need to have a restricted funds reserve. There's other ways to manage that fund. So once again, we're suggesting we don't close that reserve. And the workers' comp reserve, once again, as well, if we can manage workers' compensation as and when it occurs, for it to be paid out from municipal funds, we don't necessarily need to keep it in a separate reserve. So totally a close of 5 reserves is what's being recommended. There's a lot of administrative burden as well with maintaining money in separate reserves, and hence we've done an overview of the purpose of the reserves, and we're suggesting we close these 5. A couple of new reserves we're suggesting are open. So one's a Woodside Partnership Reserve. Once again, as the name suggests, this is to allocate funds from the Woodside Partnership that the city has, and specifically for that purpose. And a strategic reserve to park money that sometimes we receive from various areas that are undergoing a process of contention. So example of that is if we receive extra rates from, say, development on the borough for $8 million that we think might be challenged, rather than putting it in a reserve fund and having to take it out from there or put it somewhere else, we make sure that it's put in a strategic reserve while we wait the outcome of the contentious issue. And once this is all, then we can move it along as per what council wants to do. As part of the closing the reserves and opening new ones as well, we're just fine tweaking some of the naming conventions with 3 of the reserves there. So the partnership reserve, which I mentioned previously, that was the partnership reserve for Rio Tinto funds. As you're suggesting, we're starting a new Woodside reserve. So hence we're going to name the partnership reserve the Rio Partnership Reserve. There's 2 separate reserves, one for the Rio Partnership and one for the Woodside Partnership. And then with the aerodrome and waste management reserve, we're taking out the additional wording of and the funding of employee entitlements because we don't need that and we're not going to use it for that purpose anymore. And then lastly, these are just an overview of the amounts currently in those reserves. So there's 650,000 in the community development reserve, 2,300 in the mosquito control reserve, and the various other amounts you can see there. Those funds will be allocated to the municipal funds, as I mentioned earlier, because we'll just pay them from there. And that's what basically happens when we close the reserve. We go into the municipal funds and use it from there. Any questions?
Thank you, Alistair. That was well worked through. No questions?
You want to stay for 1 minute?
Yeah, the next one as well.
Sure. Show Henry how it's done in 3 minutes.
Okay, so we're on to 9.6, and that is the proposed fees and charges that will go out for public advertising. Yes, Alistair, take us through our fees and charges, please.
Sure. All right, so this is the fees and charges. So the couple of fees and charges that remain unchanged. I won't go through them all, but the purpose of this slide is to show you that some fees and charges aren't going anywhere. They aren't increasing, for example. So the airport parking, waste disposal, Rowan Sports Stadium and pool admissions, personal training fees, become precinct fees, and some ticket charges for movies are remaining unchanged. There's some fees and charges that are deleting because we no longer require them. Things like the weighbridge for public use because we don't have DOT certification for the same. There's a couple of other providers in town, and the director for infrastructure and strategic projects has provided information to council in terms of who else is out there that provides that service. Things like the rubber product fee has been added to the tire fee. So there's a couple of other fees on there that have been amalgamated into some of the other group fees that we have. And then things like the kiosk hire and the audio-visual charges have been taken out because we don't have that equipment anymore. So hence we're not charging the fee. And there's a few new fees and charges. So this offloading fee for City of Karratha water plant as a present. There's some training sessions that have been broken down into smaller chunks as per feedback received from the community to have a 5-visit, a 10-visit, and a kickstart pack to make it more options available to the community. Hence, those are new charges and fees put in there. Similarly, with the membership subscription, we have put in a single year and a multi-year family memberships to help the community out and make some options available in those partnerships. As I mentioned before, with some of the audiovisual equipment at the REIT that's not available, there's other audiovisual equipment that we have purchased that is available. And so there's additional fees for the hire of those, including some outdoor equipment and some microphone fees and a folding stage. So a couple of fees have increased above assumption, and mostly this is because the fees have been rounded off at the request of the various teams to make it just easier so that there's less change for handling, for example. But also, none of these fees haven't been increased for a number of financial years. So sort of we are bringing them along to tally up those fees and charges. Because these fees are so small in amounts, when you make, say, a $2 or $3 increase, it creates a substantial percentage increase. And hence, as you can see on the last column on the right, some of the percentage increases are 16% and 11%. But that's mainly because, as I mentioned, there's small nominal changes. So the amount there, as you can see, the increase was a $4 increase. But in the scheme of the overall fees, it is a huge percentage increase. There's some reduction in fees and charges as well. So there's good news there for the community. So the Aqua Run hire fees and charges, once again, is going to be decreased. Some KLV gym body scan, lane hire fees at the pool, flow protection fees, and some other recreation and leisure programs as well have been reviewed by the team. We're proposing a reduction in some of these fees and charges. Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Alistair, for that. And then any questions on our proposed fees and charges?
I'm still on the parking concessions that was within the document itself. So get 50% discount for people with senior have a health card, or if you go through the PATS patient. So something that they usually claim after the fact. So they have to pay their normal airport parking fee and then they claim it back afterwards. And is that advertised to the community?
To the chair, I'll take that on notice and get the procedure so that I can provide that to you for next week.
Yeah, good question.
I did have some second, they've all disappeared. So I can't find them. I'm trying to pick up the ones I already have. If not, I'll message the director. Can't find it right now. I'm not going to hold that for me.
Yeah, email through Joe, and the team will answer any questions. Right, so there's no more questions on the fees and charges. We'll move on to 9.7, which is the write-off of some of our sundry debtor charges. Officer's recommendation on page 47 is that we're going to write off some of the old debts that have been outstanding every month when they come to us, like Virgin, for example, that went into receivership, and then a couple of individuals and some small businesses that are no longer registered or can't get a hold of. Does anyone have any questions on some debt write-off?
Well, through the chair, just to note that we incorporated these write-off figures in anticipation in the mid-year budget review. We did provide council with a separate notification. So financially, it actually is already incorporated in our budget. So there is whatever financial impact has been considered there.
Thank you for that. It's a bit of a shame, isn't it, that we have to write off lose debt, but some things and some
Especially
people,
some of those ones have been outstanding since I've been on council, so it's been a long
time.
Yes, yeah, I think, you know, should be exhausted.
Yeah, that's right. So no questions on that one? All right, 9.8 is the annual electors meeting. So it's the minutes from our annual electors meeting, or what we call our AGM, that was held on the 24th of March. So, has anyone got any questions on the minutes? You recall that night pretty well? It was a long night. That's basically just putting that in the agenda that that's what happened on that evening. These are the motions that were carried or lost, and we'll record that in our minutes. And then I don't know if I've seen it, but CEO is what's our
Process.
Yeah, process from now after we've done that AGM and those resolutions have been carried in particular.
Yeah.
If we can let the public know now, what's the process on sort of time frame of when they're going to hear?
Yeah, sure. So Mayor, the next steps for this is that each of those resolutions that were passed by the community in the room, we will write up an advisory paper and bring it back to council. And we have all of those papers ready to come to our next meeting in May. And so each of the resolutions will have its own paper, we'll have a discussion, and we'll provide officer advice, and it'll be up to council to decide what they want to do in terms of accepting, changing, or rejecting the officer's recommendations.
Excellent. That's good. I think it's a pretty good turnaround. It was in March, and in May we'll be receiving those public notices of motion, and we can make a decision on it. Any other questions on that item?
Through the mayor, through the chair, I'm just thinking there was a question that was addressed to me in the minutes, from Mr. Fitzgerald, and I'm just looking at my answer, and I actually don't think I answered his actual question, where he sought total salaries paid and number of staff employed, and the increase for FY 24-25. I provided a response about FTE movements, but I don't think I actually nailed the answer to his question as I'm reading it now. So what I might do is in the briefing notes, I'll provide additional information just to make sure I've answered that question fully.
All right, so Mr. Fitzgerald looks at it, yes.
But that's not what I asked. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I did respond to it generally, but I didn't specifically nail that question. So I will add a bit more information in.
Thanks for that. So we'll pick up. If there's no more questions, we'll move on to 10 and 10.1 is the waiver of meeting room hire fees, of which we have a presentation.
Yes, it's a very quick one. Thank you for that. So we have got a request in front of us to waive some hire fees for the Julawalu Art Group. Now, they are involved in the Red Earth Arts Festival, and they are providing the finale of the Red Earth Arts Festival which is going to be an incredible light show out at Pearson Cove. And I'm going to try and pronounce it. And for those people who are native speakers, if I pronounce it incorrectly, I apologise. But it's called First Lights, and it's called the Bangalayara Mungu is the event, and that's going to be the finale of Reef. It'll be a light and sound drone show, and it'll be presented by Julawalu. Now, in our conversations with Julawalu, they also said that they have an additional exhibition which they could provide at no extra cost to the city. And this has come about after we finish the programming and the costing for Reef. There is no cost for us to do this other than to waive the fees, the higher fees. So just in the interest of transparency, what they will be doing is they will have an exhibition which will be in one of the rooms in the back of the visitor centre, and that's the area that we're going to be waiving the high fees for. And it will showcase artwork, cultural stories and projections. There will also be a yellow bus that is going to be a separate exhibition space, and that will be parked in the visitor centre car park. And for those of you who remember some of the fantastic exhibitions that used to be presented at Ganalili, some of that content will be involved in this exhibition. So it's come about through Reef. It's an additional opportunity. And just the specifics for council to be aware of is to host this exhibition. It'll last for 8 weeks. It will open on the 14th of May, but there'll be a bumping period from the 7th of May, which is included in the fee waiver. There's going to be 3 staff there 3 days a week to support it. If there you can see my typo there. It's supposed to say Julawalu website. So any sales will be via the Julawalu website. So in terms of if there's any artworks or anything that sell, the reason we mention that is that there's not going to be any staff overheads or staff infrastructure used for sales, and the fee waiver itself is about just over $6,000. So hopefully I bumbled my way through that okay, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, CEO. Anyone got any questions on the Julawalu?
Well, I don't have a question, but I think how do we get this in here as an annual event? I think
That
it'd
is
be
a question.
wonderful to have this in that space.
Yeah.
You know,
To use that space annually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll definitely take that as a question on notice.
Through the chair, the KTVC are really excited about the opportunity of having this exhibition in the back room. It's a space that does not typically get used very often, probably literally only a handful of times a year by an external hire. So it's not a space that would otherwise be used by somebody else. It's great for the start of our visitor season to have people be able to come in and see this exhibition. So we find some really nice complimentary offering to the visitor centre.
Yeah.
And the reason that number looks a little bit high potentially is because we don't actually have a day hire fee currently for that room. We've got it based on an hourly rate because normally we only hire it out for 1 or 2 hours at a time. So we have discussed internally about whether we put a new fee and charge in. We haven't worked through that yet for this kind of event in future to make it a bit more reasonable.
And the yellow bus is that will just be parked on site. Isn't there parked on site or something? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, look, I don't know the specifics and I can take that on notice, but my understanding is that it's effectively a travelling exhibition space. So it will be continuation of the exhibition. And yes, it'll be located in that car park out the front of the visitor centre.
So if this exhibition becomes successful, and the space becomes successful, and that we've just opened it up to travelling exhibitions in the future, and word gets out that it could be a good space, these organisations are still going to be for profit, right? So if based on this exhibition, if it's successful, would then we be looking at maybe not waiving fees because they are for profits at the end of the day as well.
So your question is, would we waive fees in the future?
Yeah, I understand the context of why the justification from the admin as to
Yeah.
why we're waiting this one.
Yeah,
But I can see as well that it could be pretty successful.
yeah,
And the space we utilise the pitch a bit more.
yeah.
And it's running, you go down that space. If we think about it as a for profit, like
Yeah, so I think there's not any ticket sales, so the exhibitor is not making any revenue from this. So effectively what we're doing is saying it costs them nothing, and they're providing staff there 3 days a week at their own expense.
Yeah.
We're providing the space.
yeah.
It's free for all the community, and and they get a financial benefit if they sell anything. So that's effectively the balancing act there. I think if it was a ticketed event, then you probably look at it a little bit differently. I don't think it's going to be a huge sales channel for them. If you were looking at it as a for-profit sales experience, then you might look at it a little bit differently. So I think my response would be this would be a really good pilot. Let's call it a pilot and see how it fares, and we will be in a better position to advise council next time around.
Yes, through the chair, I think there's two other pieces of work happening at the moment that will probably inform how we deal with this kind of activity moving forward. So we've got a presentation to council at the workshop next month about the visit information study that we've done.
Yes.
So that'll look at how we use that space moving forward. But the other piece of work you've obviously got before you is the community infrastructure plan, which looks at whether or not, for instance, there's demand for a cultural centre and those kind of activities in Karratha. That space doesn't necessarily get locked up for this use.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks you. Thank you for the information. Any other questions on that item? No, okay, then move on to 10.2, which is the draft community infrastructure plan, of which CEO, you're doing the presentation as well?
Yep. Yes, I'm participating here.
Welcome, Councillor Roots, welcome.
That was pretty well timed. Councillors, this item is about seeking your agreement to put the draft community infrastructure plan out for public feedback and public comment. I think the director just mentioned the community infrastructure plan. It's a really important piece of our planning process for the future. This gives you a little bit of an idea of the steps we've gone through, and we've done a lot of legwork around what is the community's expectations, needs, aspirations, desires for community infrastructure for our city. And particularly stage 4, we spent a lot of time talking to the community, talking to sporting groups, talking to arts groups, different community groups who are looking for spaces. And then what we've done is consolidate all of that together and put that into a draft plan, which is, and we're now at stage 6, which is the implementation plan and draft report. Now, just to, we don't actually define what a community infrastructure plan is in this presentation. So just to sort of say, it's anything that is like our physical built space that the city is responsible for. And it includes things like community halls, sports grounds. The mayor a moment ago mentioned like if we wanted to have a gallery space, if we want to have a soccer pitch, anything that is a built environment that is a facility that the community is going to use. And really what we've done is created a bit of a 10-year view of what we think is going to be required. We've gone through a process of identifying what those future directions might be, and we are looking at what actions and investment the city might take and what's needed both now and also into the future. So we've tried to cover off a lot of those sorts of pieces. And the other thing to be aware of is that it's applicable for not only the city of Karratha as a whole, but we've looked at town-specific, or they've called them catchment-based views.
So we've got a town by town basis of what might be the local needs there and the opportunities that are specific to those areas as well. There's 8 themes or 8 directions that actually apply to the entire city in the report. And just to very quickly kind of go through some of those directions are things like we would want to have fair and equitable access to facilities. We want to have a program of maintenance and ongoing works for existing facilities, monitor the use of those facilities and watch how they change over time. Have a commitment that a sporting pavilion will be added to any significant new sporting field. That sporting lights should be at all sporting fields and courts because we know people like to do exercise at night in our environment. That there should be storage facilities wherever we have a sports facility. These things seem very obvious now, but if we set them as a standard, it's something we can plan for in our budgets going forward. That we should have an open space strategy, and that's another piece of work which actually adds thinking to how we use our open spaces in and around sporting fields. So that might be about gardens and sort of passive recreation areas. And then finally, that we need to increase the provision of shade, surprisingly, or not. Town-based, you can see here that the detail is in the report, but we've broken it down by those different catchment areas or those different towns. And we've also tried to kind of indicate which ones might actually be upfront in the planning process, short, medium and longer term. In the short term column, you're seeing things that are either already underway or commenced or expected to commence, and we're in the planning phase. So you can see 36 out of the 58 different directions actually in that short-term environment. And then you can see we've got a 5 to 10 year view and then a 10-year plus view. Now, probably one of the things to be aware of is that this is going to be a rolling plan. So we will continually review it and update it as we're doing our community planning and infrastructure. So we don't set a 10-year plan now and go, it doesn't get updated. If council decides that something wants to come forward in the from medium into short term and they want to do it sooner, we then need to just look at whether or not we reschedule and reprioritise something else. So it gives us a planning and project prioritisation view of how we do things. And this is my final slide, which is just to say our purpose to go out for public advertising is to accurately see that if we captured correctly the feedback that we received. Does this capture the aspirations for our community requirements? And we'll be going out for a 4-week period. We'll take that feedback on board. If we need to make any changes, we'll do that. We'll bring that feedback back, so it's very transparent once again, and we will reconsider that at the July meeting. Now, I did get a question from the Mayor during the week, which was actually about, look, what if we have a plan for a particular site, and is that incorporated in here? So not necessarily. So what we've got at the moment is we've effectively got a plan for what our needs are, and it's focused on the needs. And we may actually need to go through a second piece, which is about if there's something new, we may need to go through another piece, which is what's the best location for that need. So, for example, we often talk about the fact that we need additional soccer, square pitch grounds. That need is identified in this plan, but the location is not necessarily pinned down yet. But that will be the piece of work that goes into the planning to make sure that as we get all of the moving pieces, we can sort of plan them out, jigsaw-like, and make sure we know what's going where. Questions?
Well, I'll follow up with my question that I asked you last week.
Yeah.
And the reason I had that question is because, I've been working with, the junior soccer and junior rugby on thinking about their expansion and having dedicated space. And in the report that the consultant's done, it actually does sort of say in there, if the community is to read it, it does say that we should create a master sporting precinct plan at Bulgara.
Yep.
Which then suggests that there could be square pitches. So this goes out to the community. I know that I'll get questions from those organisations around is the plan the city putting forward to put soccer, rugby at the Bulgara sporting precinct?
Yeah.
Where they've identified and told me that they want it more centrally located, obviously, because the way the Karratha is spread out, Bulgara is at one end of town.
Yeah.
So I'm just worried that in the report we put out to public that people might read that and go, oh, well, that's where our club's going to be going in the future, is to Bulgara.
Well, my best response to that would be to make sure that gets fed. Those questions or concerns get fed into the community feedback. So I think that the important response from us is this is a draft. If something is not clear, if something looks like it's in conflict, if something is being suggested that perhaps indicates it might be in the wrong location, this is a really great opportunity for those comments to go into the feedback process. And then we can fine tune it and make sure that the final report is reflecting our community's needs and aspirations. Or if there is a plan, what that highlights is we haven't been clear enough, and we can make sure that council have that clarity. And ultimately, council will be deciding whether to accept this report in July. So that feedback process is really important.
So would you suggest that even as elected members that we still are part of this community feedback process? Because
I would absolutely encourage you to do that.
Particularly as we might have more information than others about, certain movements and certain things. For example, the consultants also put in here that the community has expressed desire for a diving pool, diving board, water slide and KLP. And as I don't know if everyone knows, we did do a report on putting a water slide at the Leisureplace, where the consultant says, that they're not supporting of that.
Yeah.
And so the other feedback question I have is, well, how do we clearly define what a water park is?
Yeah, well, put that feedback in. There is a second piece of work, which is actually a response to a community resolution from the electors meeting, which we'll be discussing next month in May as well. So we can have a couple of bites at that particular aquatic park conversation. It's definitely high on the ask list. We've just got to work out as a community, and you as council will decide with where and how you want that to look based on the feedback that you've received.
Any other questions?
Councillor Roots, I think, has one.
Councillor Roots.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just to, I suppose, extend on something you were saying, Councillor Scott, there has been some confusion, I suppose, around current feedback and community consultation with our community strategic plan.
Right.
So if this was to pass and we go out for consultation on our community infrastructure plan, I would just love to see if we could perhaps, I know it's challenging because it's such a broad document spanning a decade, and in some cases more than a decade, but if we could try to make it really nice and clear that it is a draft and we are asking for further feedback, because I'm finding, with current engagement that I'm having to be really explicit that it's draft, and we do want, like, the discourse, we do want discussion open. So however we put it out, if it does get passed, can it be really explicit that it is a draft?
I'll definitely take that request on notice. So I think also this is part of an ongoing approach to how we engage with community, is that we listen to community, we create a draft, we play it back to make sure that we have understood it and tweak anything that we've got wrong, and then we nail the final. So we're seeing now a couple of examples of where we're doing that. So I think your point is a really good one, Councillor Roots. And we'll make sure that that draft stamp is really clear and the where to from here is really clear. I think that's fair. And hopefully the community will start to see this as a bit of a sequence that they become familiar with, that we don't just do one thing and then write a document that is the final. We give people the chance to check it before we nail it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Any other questions?
I just have one. The document was about table 3 under the number of existing community facilities. And I know you sort of talked, so they aren't controlled by the City of Karratha because if they're not, I suppose, it says there are other sporting facilities that we have in town. It says BMX racing. They said there's no BMX racing, but there is underneath that it says BMX track / pump track. So, but BMX racing is a thing. I mean, you have got one because it's listed as none.
Okay.
There's another one for a motorbike racing facility because we have got one in Karratha that's not listed either.
Right.
There's one in Wickham, and golf course. I thought we still have got Wickham golf course, haven't we?
So you're right in that the focus of this is community owned and managed infrastructure. I'm just thinking, I might take that on notice just to fully explore your question, just to make sure I've captured that.
Yeah, and then it says, Aboriginal meeting place is, Woodbrook Law Ground. Is that classed as a meeting place? I don't know. So there's some of just those questions.
Okay. So a couple of questions there about facilities which perhaps are not within our control, but they might still be in the audit, right?
Yeah, that's
because they exist.
Yeah, they do exist. So people are using them as part of the community, even if it's not owned by City of Karratha.
Yeah, really good point.
Yeah,
I think because we went out and sought effectively a bit of a gap analysis, we were by default looking at things that didn't exist, or things people knew were there, and things that were partly aspirational lists. So I'm sort of intuiting that there was probably a presumption that if something was there, that it was kind of taken care of in the conversation. But good question. All right.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Okay, moving on to 10.3, which is the large community grants. With the Office of Regulation 65 to approve the following applicants to receive funding, as listed in the table there. And then also 2 is decline the following applicants to receive funding under that scheme, as listed in the total. Does anyone have any questions around our large community grants?
Obviously, there's certain stuff we can't talk about due to confidentiality in the back end. But for instance, I'm just worrying about obviously I know that some of the people that weren't recommended that the directors were going to work through with the nomination, or the people that put their applications in about how they can work towards something. I'm just worried about something like, for instance, the Nickel Bay Speedway Club, Sprint Car Stampede 2025, that's always gone ahead every year and we've always funded them for them. So such a short turnaround, I think it is mid-year they run that, or is year-round FNAC time. I'm just wondering if there's still time for staff to work through that in time. If they don't get funding, will that not go ahead? So I suppose that's, things like that have been ongoing for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about something like, for instance, that one there.
So that's the Nickel Bay Speedway Club item?
Yeah.
Okay. We can perhaps provide a bit more detailed feedback on the analysis for councillors' view, and perhaps what the action is.
Or if we can discuss it behind closed doors after.
We could do that behind closed doors. The manager who led the evaluation process, there was a panel that was involved in setting the grants. I know that when I went through and reviewed them and asked a few questions, some of the feedback I got at a general level was that some of the applicants were not eligible, so that perhaps is not
doesn't apply there, but some were not eligible or didn't meet the criteria. And some actually didn't actually respond to some of the key parts of the application that were requested. So when we went through putting a group of applicants alongside each other, some we were able to assess, some we weren't able to assess. So there is possibly a piece there around what information we provided, but we can give you specifics on a couple of those ones if you'd like them.
Yeah, I think it's good as well to do that, because sometimes there's capacity issues for some of these community groups
Correct,
as well.
yeah.
So take them offline and work with them to ensure it's in the future. Any other questions on our large community grants? No? Okay. 10.4 is the Karratha Sport and Rec Club rental appeal with the officer's recommendation on page 71, and then as the council uphold the proposed annual rental fee of $6,500 and outgoing to the Karratha Sport and Recreation Club in accordance with the council's community leasing of land policy, CS25. Anyone have any questions around the Karratha Sport and Rec Club?
I've got two.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. So first one for me is, have the Sport and Rec Club indicated what that $6,500 would mean to them financially? When we went through a similar situation before with KCH, they were quite articulate on what that would mean for them, ability to keep doors open or not, or some more information around that would have been handy. And the second question is, have they asked to come and do a deputation at the meeting?
So through the chair, in answer to that second one, no, I'm not aware of any deputations.
Okay.
In answer to your first question, the appeal itself, I think, is an attachment. But in the report, it does talk about that they would be using those funds towards maintenance and repairs of the facility. So I think that was kind of their response.
Okay.
As I understood it. Council would see that we've attached as a confidential item the financials, so you can have a bit of an idea in terms of
but then with the drawing
financial. Well, I'm happy to answer any questions, but there is some financial data there for you to consider. Yeah. And I think probably the other thing that I'd mention is that they are in a gross annual revenue bracket of 400,000 to $1 million, which is a sizable not-for-profit organisation. The actual facility itself would typically rent out at over $40,000 a year, and it has been significantly discounted back to the $6,000 or $6,500 based on their community contributions. So I think it's actually, but what we're saying now is we're applying a logic and a rationale and a methodology to how we charge a leasing fee for a facility like this. So I'm happy to take any other questions.
Any other questions? No? Right. 10.5 is, yes, as if I wanted to. Any interest on this one? Okay, 10.5 is the multi-year funding request for the Dampier Community Association with the officer's recommendation on page 75, and that is that the council approve a 3-year funding request for $101,500 to the DCA for the 5 major annual community events, as Councillor Phelan put out in their deputation. Are there any questions on the multi-year funding arrangement for DCA? No? Councillor Roots? No, nothing. It's hard. Hard coming out with questions when you know in your mind it's all positive.
It was also a really good precedent set for them. They've executed all of those events really well in the past. It's that's not a question.
It's well written, so you don't.
Yeah, we have a lot of information here, and there's a lot of precedent there. It's just prior experience. So.
All right, moving on then. Now, someone get themselves on. Okay, and then 11 is the major event sponsorship contraction program for the sponsorship Staircase to the Moon. So I'd like to ask the Deputy Mayor to take over chair, and I will step out of the room.
So just before you commence the Mayor's lecture. So we do have a presentation on this.
Do you want me to just stay here for this one?
It's up to you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the item is item 11.1, major event sponsorship and attraction program, proposed sponsorship for Staircase to the Moon for the Storyteller Chef.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep this quick, seeing we had a deputation earlier by Zach Green. Just wanted to let you know that this event has been assessed against the city's major event sponsorship attraction program and their selection criteria. This is for 1 year and be assessed thereafter. It's been assessed against its strategic alignment, its economic impact, community and social impact, environmental impact, and development services feel that it does enhance livability, tourism growth, increase Indigenous awareness, and represent a return on investment for the city. So the development service is proposing to support year one of $27,500. Any questions?
I think that was reasonably straightforward. Thank you, ladies. Just in conclusion, thank you. On page 80, we've got the officer's recommendation that council would approve the sponsorship funding to the Storyteller for 1 year of the Staircase to the Moon. Okay, so if there's no further questions, shall we bring the Mayor back in?
That's quick.
And Mr. Mayor, you're up to 11.2.
11.2. Okay. 11.2 is the initiation of scheme amendment number 60, the Karratha pony scheme number 8, the omnibus amendment of, no, we don't, we've been through this. So what's in front of us is the officer's recommendation on page 86. Which is quite detailed, and as you all recall, we have been through this presentation from the Director of Corporate Plaintiff around this. Are there any questions on the amendment?
Thank you. That was a lot.
Yeah, well, there's it's a big body of work, bringing, really us into the future, really. Like,
through the chair, it's probably worth noting that if council supports the initiation of the amendment, it will get publicly advertised anyway. It will come back to council. There's obviously opportunities to amend any of the recommendations if we see fit. But I'm happy to take any questions via email as you work through the document if you've got any questions. Principally, it's tidy ups to errors of text or in the scheme maps. It's to make changes that will align the the scheme with the regulations, which take precedence regardless. So it's to try and streamline. In some cases, it's to reduce a little bit of red tape to make it easy to get approved.
Because I noticed that, obviously there's certain items in there. In the zoning, for example, that just didn't exist in our scheme. And so we're adding them in to update it as well.
Yeah, so the scheme has had a number of updates over the last 10 years, but the regulations that we currently work with were only introduced in 2015, so they're only about 10 years old. And there's been changes to the regulations, particularly in response to COVID, which have introduced new or different land use terms. We're just trying to make our scheme contemporary to try and link up with the model scheme provisions.
Any other questions? Scheme movement, no. Okay. 12 is projects and infrastructure reports. 12.1 being the early acquisition of long lead time fleet and plant items with the officer's recommendation on page 94. And that is they are asking us to endorse the early order of the fleet and plant items listed in the report and approve by absolute majority an allocation of 1.6 million to fund the early order of fleet and plant items as part of our 25-26 budget. Does anyone have any questions about giving the Director of Projects and Infrastructure suitable funding?
Makes very good sense.
Yeah. Well, Director, would you like to explain to the people listening why we need to pre-order these long lead items?
Yes, through the chair, I guess, and in accordance with the council policy that we have a useful life of all of our fleet and plant, and to either optimise the replacement value, or when equipment reaches the end of its life, we obviously schedule to replace it. In more recent times, and particularly since COVID, it's been quite challenging in terms of timeframes to get certain fleet and plant replaced. And as you'll see, the items that are listed here, the 5 of them, in most cases, we're suggesting that there could be anywhere up to a year to effectively to procure. What we're aiming to do is to order these now, or at least go to tender to award these now, so that orders can be placed, noting that the funds actually would be expended in the next financial year. But because council hasn't approved next year's budget, we're looking for an early approval. I will say this makes up just shy of half of next year's anticipated fleet and plant program in terms of value. It's nearly $3.5 million next year. But to ensure that we have a timely replacement and therefore can minimise what would start to be some costly ongoing maintenance, we're seeking council approval now.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on this item? No? All right, and the 13 is the Chief Executive Officer reports.
We've got a couple more project infrastructure.
Sorry, I missed it. I didn't expand the link. Right, thank you for that.
That's right.
Okay, sorry, 12.2. So playground revitalisation at the Tambray and Churchway Park. The tender outcome and the officer recommendation on page 98. Now we accept the tender submitted by For Park Australia as the most advantageous tender to form a contract, and we authorise the CEO to execute that contract with For Park Australia, and then we approve by absolute majority a budgetary amendment to deliver the playground revitalisation works to the value of $580,000. Does anyone have any questions around the revitalisation tender outcome? Councillor Johansson?
The removal of minor demolition waste and disposal off-site. One park is 127,000. One park is 70,000.
Through the chair, and I appreciate that Councillor Johansson contacted me last week to give me a heads up so that I could research that. And in going back through it, the city issued post-tender clarification to clarify the extent of what had been allowed. As it turns out, what the contractor has allowed under those 2 items is actually for preliminaries and incidentals and all costs associated with installation of the playgrounds at each park. And the actual removal and disposal of the existing playground is not part of this contract. in any significant amount. It's quite minor.
So the smaller park's costing 57,000 more than the bigger park.
In terms of the costs that have been allowed by the tenderer, that is correct. So it includes the installation of the play equipment and all associated works that are not further broken down in the costing schedule. So in fairness, what should have been clarified and probably provided in terms of detail is exactly the elements that makes up. But that's how they've priced the job.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? Yeah, other questions?
How much is the sign replacement going to cost?
Through the chair, I'll take that on notice.
And can it be done with just a sticker rather than replacing them?
And just to clarify for everyone who's tuning in or listening, your question around the sign replacement is because of
the incorrect naming of the park.
You want to expand on that?
Yeah, look, so through the chair, there was a council request last week, but effectively there was a community signage project which was undertaken some 5 or 6 years ago, and the park sign that was put up at Tambray Park, which is the name of the park, is in accordance with the Geographic Names Committee. It's effectively geographically known as that, but colloquially was named as Flannel Bush Park. And so that was put onto a sign some 5 years ago. That's the information that Councillor Hansen's referring to.
Flannel Bush being the road street, the road.
Correct. The park is situated on.
Which makes more sense than Tambray Park.
Okay, any other questions on 12.2? No, so we've got 12.3. Oh, sorry.
Is there a cancellation cost to the tender? Like if we say no?
Through the chair, if council elects not to award a contract, there is no cost associated with paying the contractor who has submitted a bid, because no contract has been awarded. The only cost impact or time impact would be officers' time in re-tendering.
Okay, there's all the questions on that one. All right, 12.3 is the Karratha Back Beach Jetty Maintenance Tender Outcome. The officer's recommendation on page 102, and that is that we accept the tender submitted by PCM Group as the most advantageous tender to form a contract, and we authorise the CEO to execute a contract with PCM Group, subject to any variations of the minor nature, and approved by absolute majority, an increased budget allocation of $360,500 in the 24-25 budget to be funded from the infrastructure reserve to deliver the Karratha Back Beach Jetty maintenance, which results in a no net impact for the 24-25 budget surplus deficit. Does anyone have any questions around the tender outcome for the Back Beach Jetty maintenance?
I suppose just a bit more information, if I could, about obviously the cost to replace some parts, and they said you have to strip it down. It's going to possibly take 4 weeks for it to be done. I suppose my thoughts were how much did it originally cost to build the jetty in the first place. Obviously, we're spending a lot of money, but it's now $667,000. So can they replace maybe rather than cleaning some parts, can they replace it with new and give it even more longevity? But is the structure? I know they talk about cutting stuff out around concrete and whatever else. So I suppose can you elaborate on some of the works being done as to I was trying to think per cost to fix it up or to replace it and get longer life out. It says 25-year term on the whole lifespan of the jetty.
Yeah. So through the chair, the cost benefit of maintaining versus replacing has been contemplated. The most recent example of new jetty structures that have been installed have been at Johns Creek and also at Dampier. The cost was around $1.5 million, for the construction of those. And that was using elements of what had previously been there, particularly in relation to the pile structure. The plan for these works is to retain the piles, which obviously are driven into the ground that hold the structure up. And the key elements, which is all then the steel that is attached to the framing of the ramp and the associated decking, is what's intended to be removed, blasted, coated, and reinstalled. So we feel it's an effective use, and it would be a substantially greater cost if we were to contemplate replacing other parts of this structure, including the piles, which do not need to be replaced.
Yeah. It was more about the soft stuff, the ramp itself. If you're going to spend the time, I know it's cost a lot in labour to do those works and sandblasts and stuff. That's what I thought. Yeah.
So, through the chair, there is no intention to replace the ramps. The ramps are in good condition. They're maintained simply, but the steel structures are the ones that show the greatest signs of deterioration and require, major overhauls from time to time. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the backbeat jetty? All right. 12.4 is the provision of graffiti removal. And there's a request to call for tender. The officer's recommendation on page 107, and there's a council agreed to invite tenders for the provision of graffiti removal for a period of 3 years with a 1-year extension option, exercisable at the sole discretion of the city. Any questions on going out for tender for graffiti removal?
Do we have much graffiti around the city? I'm just curious.
Yeah, through the chair we do, but we deal with it really effectively and quickly through this process and the level of service that's contained within this document. As soon as something is reported, be it through our staff or through the public, and depending on whether it's obscene, offensive, racist, etc., it's dealt with within 2 days. So that's the service level that we've got. We have had various spates of graffiti damage over time. You've spent typically anywhere between $40,000 to $80,000 a year on this contract.
I suppose one of the reasons I'm asking is lately I've been dealing with a graffiti artist, and I'm wondering, would a legal wall be something that we could look at to stop illegal tagging?
Yeah. Through the chair, the most graffiti damage that we get, or we tend to get, is on some of the assets like footpaths, where that tends to be the kids have got cans or something along those lines. Property boundary fences that adjoin city reserves, so the back of a property or the side of a property, which we don't expect the owner to do that, we go and address that.
Maybe it's something that we could look at somewhere down the track.
You're suggesting build a wall?
Oh, they have lots of walls. Just make them one of those walls, a legal wall.
Suggesting it could be part of our CBD precinct plan.
No.
Or potentially our public art strategy.
That's
might
right.
enable something like that.
Well, yes, I saw what our artists did at a workshop lately, and it's quite beautiful.
It is amazing.
Make it legal.
Make it. All right. Any other questions on going up attended for graffiti removal? No. All right. 12.5. Okay, 12.5 is the crossovers and access ways policy review with the officer's recommendation on page 111, and it is that council adopt the amended council policy TE06 crossovers and access ways as attached in the report. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Walsh-Lamar.
Just on the policy, I think it'd be good at actually any of our policies always find a bit confusing. I know down the very bottom it's got when they were assessed and when they were rechecked, but I think it'd be good to have the date of when it was last approved at the very top of the policy, because I find you've got so many of them, especially when you've had you've changed the policies and there's all the amendments on it. It's very messy to read, but it'd just be better if it was up top when it was last addressed and checked over would be very handy. But anyway, number 2 for the approvals in regards to the policy, it's just got if there's a second crossover is required, only we're required to submit a separate crossover application. So I suppose 2 questions. Is there anyone that's put in 2 crossovers on their property, and why can't they apply for both at the same time? If they had to, if they knew they had 2 crossovers points in the degree of entry of block.
So through the chair, there's several corner blocks, for example, that would have side access to their property, where they would have a secondary crossover. Remembering that the crossover, which is your primary crossover to a residential property, for example, is the one that's attributed to and needs its own approval because it's the one that receives the subsidy, whereas the secondary crossover is then treated as a separate access, and not all properties can get a secondary crossover. Yep.
And the other one was the residents submitting a crossover access way applications responsible for compliance with Aboriginal heritage laws. I suppose, where is that at the moment? Because I thought there was a lot of stuff up in the air about that. And then what is the process for a community member to go through that, and how long will it take? Because I thought that might slow the whole process down.
Through the chair, it's not up in the air. The act is as per the previous legislation.
Okay, it's previous. What,
So we obviously
1972?
Yes. Yeah. So we obviously went through the process of the new act being implemented and then rescinded. So it's back to the previous version of the act. In terms of, sorry, I didn't catch the second part.
Yeah, I suppose what's the process for the community members for them to, I mean, it's different if we're a local government to do that, but what is the process for a community member to go through?
They need to identify whether it's affected by an Aboriginal heritage site, and if that's the case, they need to apply through, or they need to direct their inquiries to the DPLH to confirm whether or not they need separate approval through that.
And is that something that City would help members of the community if they're applying for a crossover? Is that something you guide them in the right direction?
We can guide them as to the process, but we can't help them submit. It's under separate legislation for which we have no control.
How would one identify?
Yeah, through the Aboriginal Heritage Register, which is a public facing website and a really good interactive map.
Yes, so an individual person will have to have the knowledge to go to that website to check.
Through the chair, we'll direct them.
You with City
part of the process. Yeah.
So they need that step first before they can apply, but particularly in Dampier.
They can apply without that, and it can be a conditioned application, as far as I'm aware, is what we're proposing to do. Yep. Appreciating that the onus is on the owner of the property to comply.
Through the chair, that's no different to if you lodged a development application, which was subject to state heritage legislation. It's on the proponent to address that matter, not the city.
So the city could give permission, but it's up to them if they haven't gone through the right channels, or does the city need proof that they've checked that before you can give them approval?
We don't need proof of that. It's separate legislation, but we would typically highlight for them that it is a separate requirement that they need to investigate. We can direct them to the appropriate process.
Yeah.
It's, for instance, it's no different to what you'd see on a development application where there might be noise regulations applicable. We might put that through an advice note to highlight to the proponent that it's an issue that they have to deal with, but it's not for us to deal with. It's to deal with.
I'm seeing the repercussions of the local government. If say there was an original site and you give them approval, they've gone ahead. It's similar to what happened down south, isn't it, with the man building a bridge over the dam and then he's been taken to.
No, through the chair, we only issue approval for legislation for which we're responsible. We do not issue any approval for legislation which we do not have.
So that means
so we only issuing an approval under the Local Government Act. So our powers are the local laws. We're not issuing approval through the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act.
But we do have a role to advise the community on what the approval process is that they need, and whose approval that they need as conditions. Yeah.
So has all of that area, particularly I suppose in Dampier, been assessed now? I suppose are you for heritage? Do we?
No, through the chair there are some identified sites. There are, I think we talked about this previously, sometimes they're what we call dithered boundaries, which don't articulate it clearly through the mapping system exactly where the site is, and that's on purpose. It's usually because there's a substantial feature that they don't want to openly identify. I don't think that's from memory, there's only a couple of sites within the town side of Dampier that are of particular concern. What pulled it in recently was the World Heritage nomination for the borough, which included Dampier. My understanding is that we now have advice from the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage that the whole of the town site was not intended to be covered by that nomination, but there's still a process to be worked through. The city is also looking at getting a Aboriginal heritage survey done, but that would be for our reserves, not the entirety of the town site.
Any other questions? No? Okay, it is hot. Is the air conditioner on?
It's having issues. It's making lots of noise, but nothing's happening.
I thought it was just about vehicles.
Yeah.
Hot flushes up here.
Okay. All right, 12.6 is the tree watering services tender outcome. The officer information on page 115. And that is that we accept the tender submitted by Poinciana Nursery as being the most advantageous and authorise the CEO to execute contract with Poinciana Nursery. Any questions in regards to the tender outcome for tree watering services? No? Pretty straightforward. All right, now we get to 13.
Yes, now you get to.
Okay. 13 is the Chief Executive Officer reports, with 13.1 being the community experience update. (13.12) concessions on fees for city facilities. 13.13 development services update, and then the Youth Advisory Group update. The April 2025 public briefing notes and table of report changes. Does anyone have any questions on any of the reports contained in item 13? No, I'll give you a minute to. There's a lot of information in these reports each month. Nothing sticking out. No. Okay, 14 notices of which previous notice has been given, which we do have some here. 2. All right, so we have 14.1. Everyone should have a copy of this in front of them.
That's through the chair.
I just received an email from Lee saying that doesn't need to be a motion.
14.1.
The dog leash one.
All right, so we're removing that. Shows the motion.
Said some bits will be done.
Right. Okay, 14.2 is a notice of motion for recycling bin non-compliance and an alternative waste management solution. And this is a request from Councillor Johansson. Councillor Johansson, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Yeah, it's just a follow-up from the sort of, it flows on from the state housing, houses are mostly the issue. A lot of people don't understand how to use the yellow lid recycling bin. We've done education programs. The problem is, people just don't learn. So why not remove the yellow lid bin, provide them with a second general bin, and then that way they can actually manage to clean up their yards properly and dispose of the rubbish. Otherwise, the yellow lid bin sits there for up to 4 weeks at a time, because it misses one cycle, misses another cycle, and it just sits there stinking because it's got rotten meat and various bits in it.
Any questions? This or Director of Strategic Projects and Infrastructure, you will give the councillors some sort of update about the waste services review and what we might be doing internally to address some of these issues that Councillor Johansson has raised.
Yeah, so through the chair, the city does enforce where it can with residents who don't use the recycling bin the way that it's intended to be used. There is a system in place of warnings and effectively then the subsequent removal of the service. So that does occur, and I'll provide some statistics and data and what that process is in response to this for the May meeting. The next thing, sorry, for this meeting, the next thing is in terms of the service itself, supplementing it with a secondary general waste bin that's red littered. There is a fee already in the fees and charges for residents, ratepayers, to be able to get a secondary domestic service on a per week basis. That is the red littered bin. And so if we introduce and provide a secondary red littered bin to people who have not done the right thing through recycling, in essence, you'd be providing them with an additional weekly service unless we change the way that we're providing waste services on a weekly or fortnightly basis. So there's a couple of elements that are a little problematic, but I understand the intent of the notice. And so we'll take that away, get the evidence together and consider what we can do to consider putting something in place, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And Councillor Johansson, so you're this is broad, like as in it applies to everyone. But you're saying that in most circumstances, it seems to be the houses that that the state controls, or that seem to have the issue with recycling. So you're trying to target them, or would this be more about just?
It's for everybody.
For everybody.
I have another follow-up question on it. Why does the general waste bin cost the same amount as the recycling waste bin?
Sorry, for the chair, clarify the bin or the collection?
The collection cost. But the general waste collection cost per year is the same amount as the recycling waste collection cost per year, which is confusing considering one's only collected every fortnight.
Chair, that's so through the chair, there is a cost per service that is effectively provided, and then we add the total cost together of recycling services and residential services to come up with what the annual fee is. So you automatically get a recycling service as part of your domestic waste management charge.
Yeah, I see that. But what I'm saying is there's an additional option for an additional recycling bin or additional general bin.
Yep.
And one's 170.90 and one's 170.90.
Yep.
So they can have another general bin for the same price in the bin that only gets emptied once every 2 weeks.
So I guess the question for that from me would be is that charge for the service or just for a bin?
Sorry, through the chair, it's the service. Yeah.
But I'm only getting half a service.
So
I don't care what you do.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Can we opt out? Is there an option for ratepayers to opt out of the yellow lid bin?
So through the chair, to provide the additional red lid bin that is collected at the same time as the green lidded bin is just the cost of, is part of that service. So it's not a significant impost to have two residential bins. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but when you look at the initial pricing at $341.75, that looks to be two amounts of $170.90.
So through the chair, that's not correct. It's not the same cost for 26 services versus 52 services.
Yeah.
It's the combination of both. And happy to provide the analysis to you.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this notice of motion?
I have a question on point number 4, Councillor Johansson, just that, so if the tenants are misusing their yellow lidded bin, you'd like to charge the owner of the property, and given that up to 70% of the properties in Karratha are owned by somebody who doesn't live in the house, so they're not owner occupiers, wouldn't you be asking the tenant to pay for the cost of that red littered bin, not the owner?
The
or
tenant,
landlord?
tenant cannot request that yellow lid bin. It has to be the owner of the ratepayer. So this would be a procedure where through steps we could, authorise the bin just added to the rates.
But ultimately the tenant should have to pay for that, should they not?
Well, they can deal with the owner. If you don't start, by trying to fix the problem, you're not going to ever change anything.
But wouldn't you be better off to try and fix the problem properly rather than just slap something on there and then see how it goes?
Slap something on there.
You just said you've got to start somewhere.
Giving them an extra bin so they can actually dispose of the general rubbish rather than leave it sitting there for weeks.
But the tip is also free.
A lot of these people don't drive.
Okay, I have no
And
further
it comes
questions.
from complexes. Like you go down and look at Warrior Streets, you look at the Dimitri complex, you look at Hutton Street. I could name pretty much half the streets around town that these complexes sit in.
Any other questions on the emergency motion? No? All right, well, if you do have any further questions, have a think about it and send it through. Send it through to Simon and his team. And we'll vote on this the following week. All right, 15 is questions by members of the students has been given. Obviously, none. 16, urgent business approval regarding none. 17 is we have some matters behind closed doors. So I'd like to ask the general public to leave. Right. Okay, that takes us through to nothing. The rest of that stuff's just attachments. So items of closure and date of our next meeting. So public briefing session is closed at 8:29 p.m. We'll see you all back here on Monday night. Food?
There is food,
There is food.
yes.
I've got a delegate's commissioning issue or something.
Yeah.
I've launched forward with it.
It's 28 degrees in here. It says it on